It is a rather cruel joke that the catalyst for the clan invasion was directly based on Primus Adrian Sims' fears and worries about the well-being of the people of the sphere. As you can remember, her visions of horrific, demonic, animal-like creatures striking from periphery was the reason to organize the ComStar Explorer Corps. However, their mission to travel and cartograph the unknown reaches of the deep periphery and the great beyond turned out to be the ignition for a chain of events that would bring a new wave of untold havoc onto the inner sphere, and should in fact end the history of ComStar as a unified organization with a clear purpose. In the summer of 3048, the Explorer Corps vessel Outbound Light jumped into clan space over the smoked Jaguar controlled world of Huntress. Immediately, Khan Leo Showers ordered his aerospace forces to seize the ship before it could exit the system or deploy any dropships. The crew of the vessel was taken alive and interrogated regarding their origins and the nature of their mission. The information they revealed under the influence of mind control drugs, truth measuring devices, and savage physical abuse gave almost all clans their first in-depth insight into the inner sphere. To make things worse, Khan Leo Showers was a radical leader of the so-called Crusader camp, those clans who insisted on returning to the sphere and subjugating all mankind under the rule of Kerensky. Therefore, Showers was the very worst person to receive this crucial information. What he learned from the Outbound Light's crew was that the Steiner-Davian Union had the inner sphere poised on the verge of forming a new Star League, without any involvement of the clans. A result that would prove the prophecies and ideals of Nicolas Kerensky, the creator of the clans, wrong. He therefore used this knowledge as a basis for initiating the clan invasion of the inner sphere a year later. The invasion, named Operation Revival by the clans, struck at the periphery with unprecedented fury. None of the pirate kingdoms or weak periphery states were even remotely prepared for an assault of the magnitude unleashed by the clans. ROM agents posted on many of these worlds managed to transmit emergency messages to Terra before communications were cut off, but none could communicate the exact nature of the attackers or their origins. The First Circuit did not know what to make out of this enemy, wielding new technology and presenting a very real threat to the inner sphere. Many feared at first that the invaders might be alien hordes, but careful analysis showed that their use of battle mech technology and their language indicated they were human. When the fighting in the periphery came to a close, Primus Waterly took matters into her own hands. She recognized that it was paramount to make contact with the attackers, to learn their intentions, and to allow a more active role for ComStar. To do so, she ordered the Explorer Corps to establish lines of communication with the unknown enemy. The brave men manning the assigned ships were ordered to jump into clan-controlled space and to broadcast a request to open diplomatic dialogue. Two of these vessels were destroyed when they failed to respond to clan smoke Jaguars' Bachal challenges. Finally, in November 3049, an Explorer Corps ship managed to establish contact with the clans. It was during this first encounter that ComStar learned that the clans were the descendants of General Kerensky's Exodus fleet. The clans treated the members of the Order with a certain degree of respect once they realized the similarities between the foundation of their society and ComStar's lonely struggle to preserve the true heritage of the fallen Star League. In January 3050, Primus Waterly appointed Presenter Marshal Vogt as ComStar's official ambassador to the clans. Vogt traveled to the clan occupation zone and entered into intense discussions with a new IlKhan, Leo Showers of the Smoke Jaguars. Within 2 months, he hammered out an agreement in which ComStar agreed to cut off all military transmissions from those worlds targeted or captured by the clans. Vogt further agreed that ComStar would provide the clans with basic information on the military disposition of the great houses and information about the size, strength, and location of Inner Sphere armed forces on worlds they planned to attack. In return, the clans promised not to interfere with ComStar's operations and to allow them to act as administrators of the worlds conquered by their invading armies. ComStar's real interest in signing the pact was to buy the Primus and the First Circuit time to learn the true goals of their enemy. The agreement allowing ComStar to administer conquered worlds also gave them access to extensive information about the clan invaders themselves. Some of the First Circuit were against Primus Waterly's plan, arguing that these actions directly violated Jerome Blake's teaching that ComStar was to remain neutral in conflicts with the Inner Sphere. But they were powerless against Primus Waterly's political machine and had to accept the new course of action. The Blessed Order would help the clans in the destruction of the Inner Sphere. In her entire career, Primus Waterly made only 2 mistakes. The first was her appointment of Anastasius Vogt to our order and to the post of Presenter Marshal. The second was making this pact with the satanic clans. These barbarians from the hinterlands very nearly succeeded in destroying our blessed order and allowed Vogt in Mori to create the rift between the word of Blake and the accused ComStar. Primus Waterly would better have served ComStar's goal by simply committing our troops to eliminating these invaders when they first appeared. The invasion came to a sudden halt when IlKhan Leo Showers died on the 31st October 3050. A dying but determined fighter pilot from the newly formed Russellhawk Republic had rammed her vessel into the bridge of the clan command ship, the Dire Wolf. By making the ultimate sacrifice, she also claimed the lives of the IlKhan and a substantial portion of his command staff. His death necessitated the recall of all invading clan khans and blood-named warriors to Strana Mehti, the capital world of the clans, to oversee the election of a new IlKhan, which gave the Inner Sphere an extra year of preparation before the renewed assault. During this year of peace, ComStar continued to serve as the administrative arm of the clans on the conquered worlds. It was a sudden revelation that changed the situation and the behavior of all involved parties. It was the final explanation of one of the greatest mysteries the Sphere had seen and Rom had failed to uncover. Colonel Jaime Wolf of the Wolf's Dragoons invited the House leaders to meet on Outreach, the Dragoons' central station and HQ. Here, he willingly revealed the origin of his unit. The Dragoons were originally an intelligence-gathering operation from the clans into the Inner Sphere. The conflict between the pro-return Crusaders and anti-return Wardens had haunted the clans for decades. Even before the capture of the Outbound Light, there was a growing movement to fulfill the prophecies of Kerensky, who had promised his faithful followers that after 3 generations, the clans would be able to return to the Inner Sphere. However, this period of clan history was, for good reason, known as the political century. So when he was pressured by Clan Ghost Bear to start preparations for an invasion, Kerlin Ward of Clan Wolf used political measures to defuse the situation. The Dragoon compromise was made. Instead of attacking into the unknown, a special contingent of warriors would be sent into the sphere, undercover, to collect as much intel as possible about the situation. This was the origin of the Wolf's Dragoons, and this was a reason for their advanced equipment. However, Kerlin Ward had double-crossed the Crusaders, and his last order had not been to prepare the invasion, but to prepare the inner sphere for the invasion. The Wolf's Dragoons would side against the clans. By opening up about these facts, Colonel Jaime Wolf was able to convince the House Lords that working together gave the inner sphere its best chance of defeating the clans. What the Primus and the First Circuit never expected was that indeed some of the House Lords would manage to put aside the differences in the interest of survival, particularly Theodore Kurita and Hansa Davian. Even Thomas Merrick was eventually convinced to cooperate. These vital agreements would later turn the tide against the clans. ComStar's failure to step in and become the political leader of the Inner Sphere was noted. Most of the House Lords assumed from their absence at this meeting that ComStar was aiding the invading clans, and they openly began to distrust the order. This suspicion would eventually unravel the fabric of power that ComStar had woven and embellished over the centuries. To replace Leo Showers as IlKhan, Ulric Kerensky of Clan Wolf was elected. An interesting choice because he was much closer to the Wardens than to the Crusaders. But nonetheless, his reappearance in the sphere marked the beginning of a new clan offensive. ComStar still had made no progress towards discovering the location of the clan homeworlds or the invaders' true objectives. And so Primus Waterly insisted on continuing to provide the clans with military target information. In January 3052, the clans Novacat and Smoked Jaguar launched an all-out offensive against the Combine's capital world, Luthien. In an unexpected show of unity between the houses, Hansa Davian ordered the elite mercenary forces of Wolf's Dragoons and the Hellhounds to defend the planet. Even though coordinator Takashi Kurita felt deep animosity towards House Davian and the mercenaries, the additional forces tipped the scale in favor of the defenders and helped defeat the clans. It was another surprise for Primus Waterly that caught her completely off guard. She would never have assumed that Davian and Kurita would fight alongside another, and this outcome but destroyed her plans. During this year of peace, Waterly had started to plan a new strategy. She believed that the leaders of the Inner Sphere would never be able to work together willingly. Only the Comgods were strong enough to truly stop the attack and drive the clans back. Her intention was to use this leverage and force the powers of the Inner Sphere into an alliance under the control of ComStar. The Primus wanted to wait out the clan's assault and exploit them in their first moment of weakness. However, many members of the First Circuit and Presenter Marshal Vogt himself protested. The presenters who opposed the Primus insisted that ComStar's duplicity brought danger to the Order and would destroy their standing inside the sphere. But Primus Waterly dismissed their fears. In fact, she hoped to further manipulate the clans and to convince them into a coordination and cooperation with her own political agenda. To do so, Primus Waterly traveled to the clan occupation zone. In January 3052, she joined the Presenter Marshal and met the IlKhan on the planet Satalis, recently captured from the Free Rosselhard Republic. She offered the IlKhan a great prize, a full military disposition of Tarkad, capital of the Lyran Commonwealth. Primus Waterly made this offer on her own initiative, without the permission or knowledge of the First Circuit. However, IlKhan Kerensky rejected her offer and informed her and the Presenter Marshal that such a campaign would only divert resources from the clan's true objective: conquering Terra, the former seat of the Star League. This announcement stunned both the Presenter Marshal and the Primus. No amount of battle analysis, no degree of familiarity with the clans had led them to suspect that Terra was the invasion's main goal. Primus Waterly was forced to admit that even ComStar could not hope to control the clans. She and Presenter Marshal Vogt spent the time traveling back to Terra, outlining a course of action against their newly discovered enemies. When the First Circuit learned the clan's true objective, they called for an immediate end to administrating the clan-held worlds. Some presenters even demanded an all-out military response. Primus Waterly, however, pointed out that remaining faithful to ComStar's pact with the clans was a necessary part of a carefully crafted answer to defend Terra and to defeat the invaders. The Presenter Marshal then outlined how the Comgurns would battle the clans for control of Terra by using a proxy world. Using the vast resources of ComStar's archives and his own knowledge of military strategy, the Presenter Marshal had to choose a world suitable to be a battlefield, or more specifically, several worlds, in case that the IlKhan would reject his preferred one. I based my selection of Tukayyid as a proxy for Terra on a variety of statistics and characteristics that pointed to the world as an excellent choice. My study of clan tactics showed that the key to defeating the clans was simply to wear down our opponents over a period of time, and Tukayyid made it possible to conduct such a campaign. Knowing that the IlKhan might reject Tukayyid as the venue for our conflict, perhaps suspecting a trap, I chose two alternatives. My second choice was the planet Jaffe in the Federated Commonwealth. The most difficult hurdle to using that planet would be asking Prince Davian and Arkensteiner to grant this favor. Even Primus Waterly might balk at the prospect. My third choice was the last resort. I knew that the IlKhan's upbringing and heritage might force him to choose to fight on Terra itself. If that worst-case scenario came to pass, I targeted the South American continent as the site of our battle. IlKhan Ulric Kerensky accepted without question my choice of Tukayyid as a battle site between the Comguards and the clans. So, Tukayyid, in the remains of the Free Republic, was to be the proxy world. Varied terrain and a small civilian population, as well as its proximity to the clan front lines, convinced Presenter Marshal Vogt that Tukayyid was the best choice. Primus Waterly sent Presenter Rees to meet with the exiled government of the Free Rosselhard Republic to negotiate for the use of the planet. His mission was a success. The FRR Parliament welcomed the opportunity to provide the site for the Inner Sphere's final victory over the clan forces. Just as they had kept their involvement with the clans a secret, ComStar attempted to keep their plan to deliver the Inner Sphere from the clan menace a secret also. After all, how could ComStar explain the knowledge of the clan plans without admitting its complicity? ComStar evacuated Tukayyid's civilian population slowly to arouse the least possible interest with the House intelligence organizations. The entire operation to engage the clans in one definitive battle would have been accomplished in secrecy were it not for the presenters Tarkat and New Avalon to leak information about ComStar's plan to the Federated Commonwealth, a breach of commitment that would have been unthinkable in the ComStar of the past. Both sides in the battle agreed to the following terms. If Tukayyid fell to the clans, ComStar would become one with them. Vogt pledged that ComStar would serve as administrators to the clan worlds, ceasing providing HBG services to successor states, and to relinquish terror to the victors. If the clans won, they would in one instant gain all tools to forge a new Star League. However, if the ComGuards defeated the clans, the IlKhan agreed to restrict his forces to the already conquered worlds, restraining the clans from seizing territories closer to Terra than a line drawn at Tukayyid for 15 years. Because the clans struck this bargain with ComStar, honor did not prevent them from attacking other worlds above the line. The houses of the Hemisphere still had to contend with the clans. Vogt bid 50 battle-mech regiments of ComGuards to defend 12 cities of Tukayyid, committing all but a token number of his total army to the battle. In addition, Vogt also bid to add artillery, air, and infantry support to his forces. Each of his clans involved in the invasion would attack 2 cities on the planet. The winner would be the side with the highest score of controlled objectives. The two leaders decided to join battle on May 1st, 3052, and the ComGuards, already mobilized, immediately began to deploy on Tukayyid, even before the Presenter Marshal returned to Sandhurst. The Presenter Marshal spent countless hours studying the tapes of battles between the clans and various Inner Sphere forces, and felt confident that he knew the one weakness of the clan fighting style. He was determined to exploit this weak spot during the battle for Tukayyid. Vogt knew that their fighting philosophy consisted of quick, conclusive attacks and short-term assaults. The clans stuck quickly and counted on fast victories, removing any need for the support necessary to conduct a long-term campaign. Vogt planned his defense carefully. He stockpiled enough repair pods and ammunition to supply his troops for more than a month. By using his forces to harass the clans, rather than to commit into a direct confrontation, he hoped to prolong the battle for Tukayyid beyond the clan's capacity to support such an operation. The clan force's greatest advantage going into the battle was their combat experience. Though Vogt's ComGuards had been trained for combat for decades, they had never experienced war. The Presenter Marshal attempted to make up for that lack of experience by coordinating the battle from a deep bunker, outfitted with Star League tech.
We are approaching Tukayyid, and our hour of truth draws near. During these past months, you have all received innumerable briefings. Now that battle is about to be joined, I urge you to remember the following vital tactics. The clans have an enormous technological advantage, which we must negate whenever and wherever we can. When triggering an ambush, wait until the last second before springing the trap. For the mechs and vehicles assigned to ambush the clans, we have placed a premium on firepower at the expense of range and movement. Therefore, your opening salvo will be your best and perhaps only chance to devastate the enemy. Strike with everything you have. After your first volley, the clans will use their superior mobility to fight at a range advantage to them. You will only get one good shot. Do not waste it. When engaging the enemy in a running battle, choose swift vehicles with long-range weapons. Avoid bogging down in a stationary engagement. Force the clans to use up as much power and ammunition fighting you off as you possibly can. If you can keep the clans in the field long enough, they will run out of ammunition and vital supplies. Accustomed as they are to quick victories, a long campaign will also eat away at their morale. Your skill and bravery are beyond question, but the enemy also fights with skill and courage. In this battle, discipline will determine the victor. Remember that, and we can win the day.
The battle began as planned on May the 1st, 3052. The last clan, Clan Wolf, hit their landing zone 5 days later. We will here not describe the Battle of Tukayyid. You probably already know the events so well that it would be pointless to expand them further. The important thing is the outcome. After 21 days of fighting, the IlKhan of the clans conceded victory to ComStar. Only Clan Wolf successfully gained control of both target cities. Clan Ghostbear held one objective but failed to take the second. Based on the surviving forces, Clan Jade Falcon achieved a draw. Both sides suffered huge losses. It soon became apparent that Tukayyid represented much more than the largest military battle in 3 centuries. The Com Guards ended the conflict with nearly 40% dead, and more than that number injured. Smoke Jaguar suffered the highest losses on the clan side, with 32% dead. Clan Wolf lost only 20% of its forces on Tukayyid. But at the same time, Primus Waterly had her own little operation going on. While the presenter Marshal met with the IlKhan to bid for the battle, Primus Waterly unfolded a plan of her own, which she dubbed Operation Scorpion. It depended on those forces left administering the HBGs in the clan occupation zone to rise up in rebellion against the clans and to retake control of those worlds. But the heart of the plan, however, was a ComStar interdiction of every house, which would throw the entire inner sphere into confusion and remind the house lords how heavily they depended on ComStar's services. Then, in return for concessions, ComStar would restore services to each successor state as they agreed to use the organization as their government's administrative arm. Primus Waterly intended for ComStar to emerge from Operation Scorpion in complete control of the inner sphere, as the presenter Marshal defeated the clan military. If successful, ComStar would become the leading power of the inner sphere, a return to the old days of the Star League, now under new management. Meanwhile, the clans would be still present, a necessary threat to force the houses into cooperation, but their position would be severely weakened by the losses on Tukayyid and the rebellions in the occupation zones. ComStar would lead its new league to crush them and then start a new golden age of technology and progress, just like Blessed Blake and Saintly Toyama predicted. The Blessed Order would completely fulfill its destiny and purpose. Operation Scorpion was potentially the greatest achievement of ComStar, the ultimate fulfillment of Blake's prophecy. The weak and tainted fools who eventually turned against us betrayed the Primus and her plan, preventing ComStar from uniting all the inner sphere under the common banner of a new Star League, led by ComStar. Waterly completed the preliminary stages of Operation Scorpion without the knowledge of the First Circuit or the presenter Marshal. She met with her supporters covertly in a hotel outside Hilton Head Island, accompanied by a cadre of loyal ROM operatives who pledged their services to the Primus personally and ensured that the presenter Marshal remained ignorant of the plan. While not present at the meeting, Waterly's hand-picked heir to the position of Primus, presenter Sharila Mori, knew of the Primus' plans early on. To play her own game and acting on ulterior loyalties, she sent the details of Operation Scorpion to Theodore Kurita, who passed the information to the Federated Commonwealth in partial repayment for Hans Davian's assistance in defending Luthien. Operation Scorpion was doomed long before it started. Primus Waterly launched Operation Scorpion as the Smoke Jaguars landed on Tukayyid. While the presenter Marshal faced the clans, The Primus secretly faced two enemies at once: the occupying clan forces and the houses of the Inner Sphere. She called together the First Circuit and announced the full interdiction of the Inner Sphere by her right as Primus. She ordered all ComStar HPG compounds to comply with the interdiction protocol and post security forces to deal with local resistance. HPG techs and ComStar forces on clan-occupied worlds received additional orders, instructing them to engage all clan occupation forces and recapture clan-held planets in the name of the Order. She believed that one swift, bold stroke could fulfill Jerome Blake's will and visions. With the Dragoons Combine and the Federated Commonwealth warned in advance, these two governments were able to take control of most of the HPGs in the realms, even before the interdiction order arrived. To make things worse, several members of the First Circuit, believing that Primus Waterly's orders went against the very nature and will of ComStar, ordered their own adepts and presenters to disobey the command. Because ComStar had not given any explanation for the interdiction, the House propaganda had no problem painting ComStar as a corrupt organization that was betraying mankind to the clans. As a result, the local population on many worlds in the Federated Commonwealth rushed the HPG compounds and took them over, sometimes at the urging of MIIO or low-key operatives. The Capellan Confederation and the Free Worlds League bore the brunt of the interdiction, because their First Circuit representatives were less sympathetic to them. The Order stunned newly appointed Chancellor Sun Tzu Liao, who personally ordered several regiments to surround key ComStar facilities and cut them off from all supplies and local communications. On several important worlds, Liao lawless troops seized the HPG stations and captured their staff, careful to take prisoners. Only Captain General Thomas Merrick showed little concern at the onset of the order. As a former member of ComStar, he believed that the Primus and the First Circuit would only order an interdiction with good reason. So Thomas Merrick simply pressed his commercial jump ships into service as a command circuit to relay any commands. But Operation Scorpion failed most stunningly in the clan occupation zone. Because most of ComStar's and the clan's military forces were in fighting on Tukayyid, the battle to control the worlds became a slow tug of war. ComStar initially held the upper hand in rebellions because the clans did not expect their dishonorable betrayal, but the clan forces had more troops on the occupied worlds. It quickly became apparent that the clans transmitted messages through ComStar as a condition of the agreement, not from necessity. On the handful of worlds that ComStar even briefly recaptured and held, Apollo, Raus, Colmar, Löwen, Dawn, Goito, Bangor, Schwarz, and Iris, the clans set up portable HPGs. Within 8 days of the beginning of Operation Scorpion, all clan-held worlds were back in contact with their leaders above Tukayyid, and by the time the battle ended, the clans again controlled every world they occupied. Operation Scorpion was a complete failure. Many of ComStar's facts are simple exaggerations. On Iris, for example, elements of a ComGuard infantry garrison harassed the clan forces from the forests of Frisco until June 22nd, also managing to liberate the DCMS garrison forces imprisoned in the Kindu Reformatory during that time, further upsetting the Novacat defenders. On Apollo, it took the 7th Falcon Regulars more than 10 weeks to track down the ComStar light ground armor forces, which hounded the Falcons in the Dolly Grey Mountains for weeks without supplies or support. The bravery of those men and women who carried out Operation Scorpion will not be forgotten, nor can the betrayal of their spirit by a corrupt few be forgiven. The final statistics of Operation Scorpion told the tale. In the Federated Commonwealth, ComStar controlled only 22% of the HPGs. In the Dragoons Combine, ComStar held only 80% of its installations. In the Compelled Confederation, ComStar maintained control of 70% of its compounds. The Free Russellhawk Republic and the Free Worlds League came closest to suffering the full impact of the ill-fated interdiction, with ComStar controlling 99% of the Russellhawk stations, minus the Tukayyid HPG, and 90% of the League stations. When presenter Marshal Vogt discovered the Primus' duplicity, he arranged for a hand-picked emissary to ensure that Terra's own defenders, Ryan's Legion, stayed loyal to himself. After returning to Terra, he met with Presenter Mori, and together they convinced Primus Waterly to resign her post. This is one of the most vicious lies of the new ComStar order. Presenter Marshal Vogt killed Primus Waterly in cold blood without even giving her a chance to defend herself. After taking power, the presenter Marshal placed all members of the First Circuit into protective custody to ensure their safety in the unrest that followed. During that period of several weeks, Vogt was visited by a vision of Jerome Blake. The image led him to a cornerstone in the Hall of History, where he found a copy of a technical readout written by Jerome Blake himself. In the preface, dated later than the journals that formed the core of ComStar beliefs, several passages clearly stated that ComStar was supposed to spread knowledge instead of holding it secret. The discovery of Blake's further writing shook the First Circuit and the very foundation of the order. The presenter Marshal realized that these new revelations must immediately be passed throughout the order, and that ComStar needed to undertake major changes to live up to the words Blake left behind. Jerome Blake never wanted all the years of devotion. He created ComStar to spread technological enlightenment to all mankind, to prevent the Dark Age from emerging by joining humans to the technology they needed for a better life. Power-hungry Primuses had corrupted ComStar's true direction. And so ends the story of the original Blessed Order. Of course, it would be possible to pretend that ComStar survived the 6th of June 3052, Primus Waterly's day of death and resignation. That it remained the same organization it was, but that would be a sham, a lie. If examined carefully and without bias, it becomes clear that Vogt murdered Waterly and then used a propaganda story to set the order on a new way. A way that was more in line with the interests of the great houses. You may have little sympathy for an organization that relied to such an extent on assassination, manipulation, and lies, like the old ComStar. But it was at best dubious to change this organization by using assassination, manipulation, and lies. The reforms of Presenter Marshal Vogt and Sharila Mori, the new Primus, would completely change the very nature of ComStar. It no longer was the driven order with a divine mission of saving mankind from itself. Instead, it became an army with an attached communications department. It would never again reach the same importance and power it once had. Instead, it became a minor player, always dependent on other forces to set the agenda. Yes, it would run the HPG network and continue to do so wide into the 32nd century, but it would do so at the orders of the great houses, not as an independent party. Its last remnants would get annihilated in 3141, never to rise again. In a way, the fate of ComStar proved that the dying Jerome Blake was right all along. To stay secure and true, ComStar had to become the Blessed Order. It needed a purpose beyond being a department of communications. Vogt had not destroyed this mission, he had just separated it from the organization. Enraged by the sudden death of Waterly, the flimsy explanations, and the blatant lies, several key members of ComStar refused to follow the new leadership. With Presenter Atrius, Demona Assiz's figurehead, they would break away and form their own faction. They left behind the original assets of ComStar, the Industries of Terror, and the majority of the HPG network. They would leave with a substantial amount of Com Guards, the men and women that had fought under the command of Vogt, and for their belief in Blake. They now had to decide where their loyalties truly were. It was quite considerate of the renegades to also remove the elements that no longer had a place in ComStar. The vast majority of ROM, with its killers, enforcers, and agents, joined them in exile. However, the most important thing they kept were the teachings of Blake and Toyama. They were true believers in neither their will nor their convictions would falter. They would carry on to fulfill the destiny assigned to them by Blake himself, and it would give them strength to do the impossible and the unthinkable. They too would fall, but it would not be a slow fade away with a rotten death. They would go down in a blaze of glory. But they were no longer ComStar. They were the word of Blake.